The room goes silent. Every eye is on him now. Not out of respect, not yet. His hands are shaking. Not from fear, from the weight of what he's about to do. Someone in the back snickers. Another whisper cuts through the air. The same kind of laughter he's heard his whole life. The clock on the wall ticks. Too loud. Too slow. He wasn't supposed to be here. Everyone knows that. Everyone expects him to fail again. A single step forward. Then another. His heart is pounding so hard it feels like it might give him away. One wrong word and it's over. One wrong move and he becomes the joke forever. The person across from him smirks, confident, certain this will end badly. He takes a breath, deep, final. This is the moment where people usually back down, where excuses are made, where dreams quietly die. But instead, he does something no one saw coming. The laughter fades, the smirks vanish, the air changes. And just before anyone can stop him, he makes the decision that will either destroy what little he has left or change everything forever. So why, in this exact moment, did everyone suddenly realize they had underestimated him? This all started on a quiet street most people would never remember. The kind of place where mornings blurred together, where nothing ever really changed, and where dreams felt like something other people were allowed to have. He lived in a cramped second-floor apartment above a closed-down repair shop, the windows always rattling when trucks passed by. The walls thin enough to hear neighbors argue about money they didn't have. His name was Daniel. At least, that's what it said on the mail that kept piling up by the door. Overdue notices. Final warnings. Bills he stopped opening because the numbers inside felt heavier than the paper. He worked days at a small warehouse on the edge of town, stacking boxes that weren't his, moving products he couldn't afford, clocking in early and leaving late without anyone noticing. To most people there, he was invisible. To a few, he was the punchline. The laughter usually came during breaks. Someone would comment on his shoes, worn thin at the soles. Someone else would ask when he planned on doing something with his life. They said it casually, like a joke, but they always looked at him when they said it. Daniel smiled when he had to, nodded, learned how to swallow embarrassment without letting it show. After work, he followed the same routine. Cheap dinner, dim lights, a notebook filled with half-written ideas he never showed anyone. He told himself it was enough to just survive, that wanting more was dangerous. Wanting more meant disappointment. Still, some nights, he stared at the ceiling and imagined a life where people didn't look past him, where his name didn't trigger a laugh or an eye roll. There were a few constants. Mr. Harris, the warehouse supervisor, who barely remembered Daniel existed unless something went wrong. Maya, a coworker who sometimes offered a quiet smile, but never stayed long enough to get involved. And the city itself, loud, impatient, unforgiving, reminding him every day how easy it was to fall behind. Nothing dramatic happened at first. No explosions. No shouting matches. Just small moments stacking up, missed opportunities. Conversations that ended before they began. A growing sense that time was running out, even though no one else seemed to notice. Daniel didn't know it yet, but the calm was temporary. The routine, the silence, the laughter, all of it was setting the stage. Every ignored idea, every unpaid bill, every time he told himself to wait just a little longer, because soon, waiting would no longer be an option. The first crack in the routine came quietly. Daniel noticed it in the way Mr. Harris stopped pretending to listen. Instructions were barked now, not explained. Shifts changed without warning. Overtime disappeared from the schedule, replaced by long silences and clipped looks. When Daniel finally asked if something was wrong, Mr. Harris didn't even look up from his clipboard. "Just keep your head down," he said. "You're lucky to have the hours you do. Lucky The word stuck, then came the rumor. It started near the loading docks, passed in half whispers between pallets and forklifts. Cutbacks, restructuring, a list being made, names already circled. Every time Daniel walked into the break room, conversation stopped, eyes flicked away. Someone laughed a little too loudly. The unease settled into his chest and refused to leave. At home, the mail pile grew heavier. One envelope had a bright red stripe across the top. Another warned of final action. The landlord left a voicemail that sounded polite, but wasn't. Daniel began sleeping in short bursts, waking to the sound of trucks that weren't there, heart racing like he'd missed something important. At work, the jokes turned sharper. "Hey, Daniel," someone called out one afternoon. "Still working on that big idea of yours?" Laughter echoed off the metal walls. Daniel forced a smile, but his face burned. He didn't respond. He never did. Silence had always felt safer. But this time, it didn't make the moment pass. It stretched it, made it worse. Maya pulled him aside later, her voice low. "You should be careful," she said. "People are watching. Harris is not on your side." That night, Daniel opened his notebook for the first time in weeks. The pages felt thinner somehow, more fragile. He reread old plans, ideas he once believed in. Now they looked naive. Risky, dangerous. He closed the notebook and shoved it under the bed like evidence of a crime. The second incident was public. A delivery went missing. No one knew how. No one asked many questions either. Harris stood in the center of the floor and listed mistakes, one by one, until his eyes landed on Daniel. "You were on that shift," he said. Daniel tried to explain. He'd followed procedure. He'd logged everything. But Harris raised a hand, cutting him off. "Excuses don't move inventory," he said. "People who make mistakes cost money." The room felt smaller, the silence heavier. Daniel felt something shift inside him, not anger exactly, but a cold awareness. He was being positioned, lined up. After that, tasks became impossible. Deadlines shrank. Instructions contradicted each other. When Daniel asked for clarification, he was told to figure it out. When he did, he was told it was wrong. Each day ended with the same thought. This is deliberate. The third blow came outside of work. Daniel returned home to find a notice taped to his door. 30 days, no discussion, no extensions. The landlord cited failure to meet obligations. The hallway smelled like dust and old paint. Someone's TV blared through a thin wall. Daniel stood there longer than necessary, staring at the paper until the words blurred. He didn't tell anyone. At work, his patience thinned. His smile faded. People noticed. That made things worse. Harris began hovering, watching, waiting. One afternoon, he leaned in close enough for Daniel to smell his coffee. "Some people," Harris said quietly, "aren't built for pressure." Daniel didn't reply. His hands were clenched so tightly, his nails dug into his palms. The final incident before everything broke happened on a Friday. A meeting was called. Mandatory. Everyone crowded into the small office. Harris stood at the front, arms crossed, wearing a look that pretended to be regret. "We're making changes," he said. "Hard decisions." Daniel felt it before his name was spoken. A tightness, a certainty. When it came, it wasn't loud, just firm, final. He was given a thin envelope. No explanation worth hearing. No apology. The room avoided his eyes as he walked out. Outside, the air felt wrong. Too open. Too indifferent. Daniel sat in his car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, the envelope unopened on the passenger seat. Everything he'd been holding back pressed forward at once. Fear, anger, shame, a sense that the ground beneath him had finally given way. He realized then that staying quiet hadn't protected him. Waiting hadn't saved him. Doing nothing had only made it easier for others to decide his worth. And somewhere in that realization, beneath the panic and the noise, something else began to form. A question. If everything was already falling apart, what did he really have left to lose? The room erupts. Daniel doesn't plan it. He just steps forward. Stop. The word cuts through the noise like glass. Harris freezes. So does everyone else. You don't get to do this, Daniel says, voice shaking but loud. Not like this. Harris laughs once, sharp, dismissive. You're done here. Take it outside. No, Daniel says. He pulls the envelope from his jacket and slams it on the desk. You framed me. The laughter dies. Murmurs ripple across the room. You blamed me for missing inventory you already wrote off, Daniel continues. You changed my assignments. You erased logs, and you thought no one would notice. Harris's smile tightens. You have proof? Daniel exhales. Then he does the thing no one expects. He turns the screen toward them. Emails, timestamps, shift changes logged after the fact. Inventory reports altered from Harris's own account. Maya gasps. Someone swears under their breath. Harris steps back. That's out of context, is it? Daniel snaps. Because I sent copies to corporate this morning. Silence. Heavy. Final. You are never cutting costs, Daniel says. You are covering losses, and you needed someone quiet to blame. Harris's face drains of color. You think this fixes your life? Daniel steps closer. No, this fixes the truth. Security appears at the door. Phones are out now. Everyone is watching. Harris opens his mouth. Nothing comes out. Daniel feels it then. The shift. The power changing hands. For the first time, he isn't invisible. He isn't the joke. He turns to leave. Behind him, someone calls his name. Respect in their voice now. Real. As the door swings open, Daniel doesn't smile. He doesn't celebrate. He just knows one thing with absolute certainty. This moment, this decision has already changed everything. The days that followed moved faster than Daniel expected. It somehow felt heavier. Word traveled quickly. Corporate investigators arrived on Monday morning. Badges clipped to their belts, expressions neutral and practiced. They didn't ask Daniel many questions at first. They didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than he ever had. Harris didn't last the week. At first, he tried to regain control. He sent emails, made calls, claimed misunderstandings. But the power he once held so comfortably had already slipped through his fingers. The same people who used to laugh now avoided his eyes. When he was escorted out, box of personal belongings in his arms, no one said goodbye. Maya found Daniel in the parking lot that afternoon. She looked relieved, tired, but relieved. I should have said something sooner, she said. Daniel shrugged. So should I. The warehouse changed after that. Quiet at first, careful. A new supervisor arrived, someone who actually listened. Schedule stabilized. People spoke more openly. The fear that had hung in the air thinned, little by little. Daniel, however, didn't stay long enough to see it fully settle. The investigation cleared his name completely. A formal apology arrived by email, followed by an offer, reinstatement, back pay, even a small promotion. Daniel read it twice, then once more, and said no. He packed his apartment slowly. 30 days still loomed, but now they felt different, lighter. The notebook resurfaced, pages no longer hidden. He spent his evenings filling them, not with perfect plans, but with honest ones. News spread beyond the warehouse. Quietly, someone from corporate reached out, then another contact. Conversations replaced accusations. Doors opened that had never existed before. Harris, meanwhile, became a rumor, a cautionary tale. Someone people spoke about in lowered voices, the way you talk about mistakes you don't want to repeat. The man who once decided other people's futures now struggled to explain his own. Daniel noticed the change in smaller ways too. Strangers met his eyes. Old coworkers nodded with something like respect. Even the landlord's tone shifted when Daniel explained he'd be moving on his own terms. What surprised him most wasn't the vindication. It was the calm. He slept through the night, ate real meals, took walks without the weight of dread pressing on his chest. The fear that once ruled every decision loosened its grip. He hadn't won by becoming louder than everyone else. He'd won by refusing to disappear. Months later, Daniel stood in a different room, under different lights. No laughter this time. No whispers. Just attention. The notebook sat open in front of him, worn at the edges, filled with the ideas he once thought were foolish. Now they were being taken seriously. Questions were asked. Notes were taken. He thought back to the man he used to be. Quiet, careful, convinced that surviving was the same as living. That version of himself felt distant now, like someone he'd known in another life. Maya sent a message that evening. The warehouse was doing better. People still talked about that day. Not as gossip, as a turning point. Daniel smiled, just a little. The irony wasn't lost on him. The moment meant to erase him had forced him to step forward. The silence that once protected him had nearly destroyed him. And the decision he made when he thought he had nothing left had given him everything he'd been too afraid to want. He wasn't rich, not famous, not invincible, but he was no longer invisible. And that made all the difference.